We had nothing to do with the bedroom. We're talking about giving people special rights and funding that, because once you become identified as special rights, then you get special benefits. They should not have any more special benefits than I do. In addition to that, the Bible is absolute. So it's not a decision that he makes or I make. Take it up with God. He's the one that said it. And he said it's an abomination. So there is no gray area when it comes to that. As far as us being too involved in absolutes, that's why we're in the mess in our country right now. We don't know where we stand as far as military. We don't know where we stand as far as spending. We don't know whether we stand when it comes to transparency in government. And when we don't have absolutes, we have rampant fraud. We have a lack of transparency. And we have the bickering and fighting that goes on, not only in our Capitol, but down at the White House. Would you like to respond to that or not?
Yeah, I would actually. I think that he talks about a special status that these folks would get. This is something that the government assigns. The Bible did not assign this through the government. This was a standard. We extend this standard.
Well, I guess what we're asking is, if you're elected to office, would you be in favor of the government extending that status?
I absolutely would. I think that, again, like I said, it doesn't cost us money. It costs us money when that person said, I want to put them on my insurance, but we don't. They go without insurance, they end up in the emergency room. This is sort of that law of unintended consequences. Now, I'm not saying that this is a thing that's going to happen all the time, but they, by marrying, do no harm to us. That doesn't make my marriage any less valuable. I don't know why anybody else would think it would. I frankly, like I said, they're going to do what they're going to do. That is their business. Far be it from me to judge them. Now, I'm not saying I would like, I'm okay with you doing anything you want to do, but at the same time, it's not my business. It's not harming me. And frankly, I don't have a problem with it anyway. I'll leave that to God. That's just something that it's like I said, I got plenty of other things to do in my own life than to worry about somebody else's.
Mr. Nesmith, next question. Explain to me your view of separation of church and state as you know it.
Well, I'll touch on something he said a minute ago. He thinks it's the lack of God, religion, morals that we're in this trouble that we're in. I would argue that it's not that. We are as religious as we've ever been. In fact, by some measures, we're more religious, because the polls they did back in the 50s, they tend to go back and say, well, people, they just identify rather than being honest about their actual attendance, their beliefs. They just do what everybody else did. So they got that margin of error. They pull it out and they go, we're surprisingly religious. I don't think it's a lack of God in the classroom. If God is not in the classroom, it's because you didn't take him there. Now, it doesn't mean you have to force him on anyone. I mean, I don't want you necessarily going into my house and forcing me to do something. You don't have to go into a school and force someone to do something. There are things, there are expectations we want to create, sure. But do I think there should be a separation of church and state? I bet the best thing to do is focus on what you're supposed to do at school, which is learn. This is not a place for a religious battle to take place. God is everywhere you go if you take him with you. So I think that's the most specious argument I've ever heard. It's a silly argument, and I don't mean to diminish anybody's thoughts on this, but I think it's a silly argument. It misses the bigger point. Look around and look at what we've done in society, and this all goes back to economics. Poverty, my friends, is not a Christian value, and it is not a family value. But an economy that creates such a thing certainly is a bad deal, and it's not for lack of morals. It's for lack of often opportunity, a lack of education, a lack of understanding, a lack of enfranchisement in this economy, in this society. I can go anywhere I want to, and I can be a beacon of light, and so can anyone else. If you go into a place and say God's not welcome here, well then maybe you're not welcome there. Then don't go there. But God is welcome anywhere you go because he's going with you. And that's the way I look at it. I mean, God's right here. I'm just fine. I think I'll be okay. So I think as far as the separation of church and state, when we start mandating that this is the way it should be, we leave room for someone else to come in and do the same thing with something we may not agree on. If you want to take a Protestant religion and make that the state religion, well then somebody tell me which one. Are we going to be Church of God? Are we going to be Methodist, Presbyterian? What's it going to be? We would never decide. That's not the government's role. And being that the government is of the people and by the people, it's every bit as religious as we are. It is a reflection of our values. So you're going to look at Washington and complain about how bad it is there. Look in the mirror first, because we voted them in. Wonder how they got there. And they say, that's not us. Well, then maybe there's part of the problem, because it isn't us up there. That is not you and I up there in Washington or in the State House here. So that's a reflection of who we are. But somehow that's been twisted. I guess I would ask myself how it got to be that way before I start saying that God isn't in the State House, the boardroom, the schoolhouse. We did just fine for many, many years without that being a huge issue. And so I would say that the more that we keep those separated, the better off religion is for us.
Mr. Thompson, your view of separation of church and state as you know it.
I'm glad you restated the question because I was a bit lost for a second. Separation of church and state. The whole reason separation of church and state came in is because they did not want a government imposing upon us one religion. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It never was intended to be that we could not have religion participate in our everyday life, including schools and government. Not once. You go back and look at the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, many of those people might not even have been Christians, but they knew the importance of having God involved in the process. I go back to moral compass again. In the absence of a moral compass, you have chaos. So, just as my children leave the home and I tell them not to forget that they're a Thompson and how they act, as soon as we, of which we're doing as a country, again, I was told today that the Air Force now, instead of in God we trust, they're going to take that out or make it optional. We continue to erode away at that. As soon as we forget or prevent our heritage of our country, we forget where we came from. We forget the Creator that gave us the opportunity. We start eroding away life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Life is about what we talked about earlier. It has to do with preserving where life started and so on. Those are all part of our history. And when that just becomes a gray area that everyone lives for themselves, and there is no moral compass, and that we're not allowed to bring God into any place, although, as my opponent said, lives in our heart, again, I will go back to the Bible. You deny him, what does he say? I will deny you. And what we're living right now is we're living in a time in our country when we have no absolutes. We have fraud rampant at our federal level and our state level because no one's held accountable. We even have some of this stuff happening in our own personal race, where we have laws that are broken, but no one's held accountable. Is that the world that we want to live in? Is that the world that my opponent would like to raise his children in? I know for my family, it's not what I'm interested in. I'd like to teach them right from wrong. I'd like to teach them that there are rules and laws and absolutes that we must follow. That's called order. And we were born, and the Bible talks about order. As soon as you get away from that, you lose order.
Mr. Thompson, next question to you. Do you tithe and or how much money have you given to charity this past year?
Absolutely, we tithe. In fact, I had this conversation today with Dr. Edwards at the church. He, in a comical way, said to me, hey, you need to move your membership from First Baptist over here to this church. Do I tithe? Absolutely. And I think money, it's important to understand, or at least how we feel. It's not my money, it's his money. I'm fortunate that I have the opportunity to be able to be a manager of that money. So giving a tithe, whatever that be, 10% or more, I personally believe it's 10%, and then your offerings are above that, is not a mandate in my life. It's a way to worship, and it's out of obedience. As far as charity-wise, it's probably hard for me to tell you, but we did publicize recently because we had the honor of being recognized as a top agent in the Southeast for community service and giving back. And it was reported we gave almost $40,000 to charity through just one of my companies this year.
Ms. Nesmith, do you tithe to your church and or how much have you given to charity over the last year?
Well, being that we are not members, now we do tithe at when we do attend, we tithe at Belmont. As far as the percentage of what we give, I was raised 10%. I watched my parents write checks, once a month, whenever it was they did their tithing. We do the same thing, although a little differently. We most of what we've given this year It's been a little. I lost my job earlier in the year. We struggled a little bit financially. So needless to say, we didn't have money coming in. So we did not, give as much. But also, every time we walked into the church, we gave what we could afford to give. That's just part of it. But we do give, some of our money goes to an uncle who is a missionary. Again, this year not as much, but probably this year we managed to give him probably only about $500, give or take, maybe even that much. Because again, we struggled, we were getting back on our feet. But usually we give to those type causes. He's a missionary now, he was in Thailand. I think he's in Europe right now. I don't know where he goes next, but most of that goes to that type of thing until our other cousin, we have a cousin that does some mission work too. We give to her to help make that possible. We've given her maybe $100, $150. But the idea there is that while we don't belong to a church right now, we try to make sure we give to causes that we feel are important. And especially within our family, they're trying to go out and do mission work. They need all the help they can get. And even if we're struggling, we're not going to be struggling the way they're struggling. So if we can spare it, even if we can't spare it, we'll just tighten it up a little bit and see if we can, hey, we'll pay for this part, we'll pay for that part. Everybody contributes, they'll make sure it happens. So that's kind of the nature of our giving. In years past, it's been better. We've been able to do more, but and hopefully going into next year, we'll be able to do a little bit more. And that's the way we do it. Not quite as good as what his companies can do, but again, the idea there is he's got it right. It's where your heart is. It's where it's supposed to be. You know what you're supposed to give to, and you try to make a difference any old way you can. So that's what we've done this year.
Last question. Mr. Nesmith, what do you think is the number one issue facing families today? And whatever that issue is, what can you do about it if you get elected?
I think it's the economy. I think all roads lead back to the economy. I think we will live in a safer, more moral, more wholesome society, more family-friendly society if we will address the underlying economic issues. And a lot of that comes down to what everybody calls a fair tax. If anybody looks at the numbers, what you're going to find may upset you, because what you're going to find is it's very close as it stands right now to having more or less a flat tax in a sense. Basically, what is given to you from the government is paid for by your socioeconomic group. That's how you get taxed. That's what goes back to you. If you crunch those numbers and look at them, you'll be a little surprised. You'd be wondering what we're paying for. See, I think we do. Government is too big, but it's not just too big, cut it in half. It's too big because we're wasting money on things that don't count. With corruption, he's absolutely right about that. It makes me angry too. And I think you'll find that he and I are probably angry about the same things. We just don't necessarily agree on how to get there. That's usually the case with all of us, I'm afraid. We just kind of get lost in translation. But the idea is that if we will get this economy more equitable, more accessible to most people, again, the way it used to be, where you could make a living wage, where a job at Walmart meant you could actually pay for things instead of the government having to step in and supplement that income with SNAP or housing assistance, which, by the way, you and I pay in our taxes. So I hope you got a thank you card from the Walton family for supporting them, because when you shop there, even if you don't shop there, you're paying them. The government's paying them to subsidize their workers. If we will get that stuff cleared out, and we will start holding companies accountable, and, holding these companies accountable for a product, labor as a product, for paying for that product, and put families back on their feet earning a real living wage, then I think a lot of our problems in this society could actually be addressed without these harsh mandates, without putting our foot down and saying this will stand no longer. Fix the economy. You will never have social justice without economic justice.
Mr. Thompson, what is the number one issue facing families today, and what can you do about it if you get elected?
Well, the specific question is what are the families facing, and that I believe that has to do, although economic is a huge thing that I'll talk about in a second, if I may, it has to do with personal responsibility. Our entitlement programs have grown massively, and I believe that they're intentionally growing, not as a result of people that can't find jobs, although the economy is tough, it's getting better. But I think it's intentional, because the more reliance we have on the government, the less initiative, the less opportunity there is for someone to go out and better themselves. As I said earlier in this week, competition always breeds a better result. Always. Iron sharpens iron, and when you have competition, what happens is you are pushed for a better solution. So I wouldn't take attack on companies because I am one of those. I am a business owner. How dare the government tell me that I'm not paying enough wage? If I'm not paying enough wage, I have a couple of employees sitting in here, by all means, they're not handcuffed to stay with me. They can find another job somewhere else. Why should I be told I have to pay a certain wage? In addition to that, what happens is the intrusion within our families with the entitlements is not self-responsibility. So, for instance, let's talk about Obamacare for a second. I used this analogy earlier this week. I had two gentlemen, both happened to be black gentlemen, when I was speaking to the Honor Society over at Georgia Highlands. And one of the gentlemen's name was Jared, the other one's Jerome. I said, Jared, let me ask you a question. You're a proponent of Obamacare, the Affordable Act. He said, yes, I am. I said, so for instance, how many people in your family? He said, there are three, myself, my mom, and my brother. I said, Jared, you go home tonight, and you're going to fix great dinner. 3 steaks, 3 potatoes, and some broccoli for your family. Now, they're not big steaks, but they're just enough. He goes, okay. And Jerome, I can't help it, buddy, but you're an alcoholic. You wasted all of your money on alcohol. And me, I blew all my money on cigarettes. Well, we're both hungry. So we knock on your door, and you answer the door, and you say, can I help you? And we said, yeah, we saw that you have some dinner. And you're going to look at me and say, who are you? And why are you here? So we're hungry, and you've got some food there. Now, Jared, you're a great guy. So you're like, wow, man. All right, come on in. And we're going to take half of your mom's steak, and we're going to cut it up, and we're going to eat it. And we're going to take half of your steak, and he's going to eat it. And then we're probably actually going to take half of your brother's steak, and we're going to eat part of that too. How's that make you feel? And he said, I don't like that one bit. So that's what Obamacare does. Takes from some, give to the others. Because I didn't take personal responsibility for myself. He's an alcoholic and wasted his money. I blew mine on my cigarettes. I had an opportunity to spend that money on whatever I want. We need to go back to giving families the opportunity to be reliant on and make the decisions from a family level. And that includes education and so on. If I can transition over to what the overall challenge is, not just a family issue, is economics. It's not education. I keep hearing that education will solve everything. And as I said earlier, I know lots of educated people sitting on their rear ends right now that are not working. That doesn't solve everything. If we can give opportunities for people to work and give them initiatives to get to work versus just giving them money, that will help and also keep the intrusion of the government out of these families to be able to operate.
Closing statement, Mr. Nesmith, tell us in 3 or 4 minutes why the Christian family and the people that are going to watch this and Christians should vote for you, why you would be the best choice for their senator.
I guess I'll just sort of tie that into what he was saying there and what I was saying earlier. He talks about competition. He talks about personal responsibility. I would be real hesitant to go to a lot of people who lost their jobs over the last 5 years and tell them you need to take more responsibility, my friend. You're in this spot because you did something wrong. I got news for all of us. None of us are in control of our outcomes as much as we think we are. Now, personal responsibility, yes, you should take it. That is your responsibility. You have children, raise them. You have a marriage, tend to it. You have business responsibilities, take care of them. However, when the company you work for goes out of business and you didn't see it coming, and you land on your butt, I don't really think, you're that guy who wasted your money on alcohol or cigarettes, or anything else for that matter. You were unfortunate. And when you go out there and there is no other job, and you got to suck it up and accept help, it doesn't make you lazy. That's a myth. It's the same old welfare queen myth we've been hearing 30 years. Competition doesn't always make everything better. You've got ample evidence to prove it. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you're just doubling up resources to get one outcome. Sometimes teamwork helps. Otherwise, why don't we all just do our own thing in our community? I mean, I made the money. Your problem, not mine. I'll pray for you, but you're on your own, pal. That doesn't help us. It drags us all down. Again, the least among us. Who are you to judge? We talk about judging people. talk about Obamacare Obamacare is a Republican idea. Okay? They're mad, but this is a Republican idea. It goes back to the Heritage Foundation in 1989. They rolled it out in 1983 itself based on a program that Nixon put forth in the early 70s. Democrats said, no, not good enough. We'd have had it then. We would have been better off. I agree. I think Obamacare is terrible. We could have saved money, been more efficient, taken all this pressure off of businesses, done all these things, and we'd have come out much better if we'd just tied it up with the current Medicare system and made Medicare for all. It would have been more efficient, and it wouldn't have been a government intrusion into our lives near as much as the corporate intrusion into our lives with insurance that they provide us. They can tell you what to do, but everybody's concerned about what the government can tell you what to do. So when I get there, if I get there, that's where I'm going to stand. I don't want more government in my life, but I want the government that is there to work. I want it to accomplish something that is good for all of us, not just for me, not just for the wealthy, not for just this population or that. It needs to work for all of us. And I can't think of anything more Christian than that. I'm not going to turn someone away just because I don't like what they did. You did it to yourself, pal. You're on your own. If we take that attitude, we're going to leave a lot of people behind. I'd say we have already. And then you know what? They're going to be there and they're going to be a burden. So instead of building schools, we're going to be building prisons. I think we already are. What have we been doing that's so conservative and great for the last 30 years? Hasn't been working. So I would say forget the labels. Conservative, liberal, who cares? What works? What doesn't work? We've heard these same bromides. They don't work. Common sense sometimes works. We need more of it. And that's exactly what I would bring. The best that I got.
Mr. Thompson, why should people vote for you for their senator, and why would you be the best choice?
Well, first of all, thank you for conducting this forum for both of us to be able to get the voice out, give people the opportunity to be able to vet out who their candidates are. First and foremost, I've said to people, take a look at your personal values, your family values. Take a look at the candidates, see who most closely aligns with what your values are. As was stated earlier, church is a part of my life. The Bible is a part of my life. It is an absolute. It is a moral compass. I believe that when you look at a man or a woman and you understand what their heart is and what their motives are, you will then see how they act and how they legislate. When you move to the other side and you take a look at it and say, what's on the hearts and minds of people? Number one, they're concerned about the fighting and bickering going on, and they're concerned about the economy. Of course, they're afraid or concerned with transportation and so on. But I believe I have the best experience and the most maturity of all the candidates to be able to work with people on a platform that I've talked about. That's a businessman that cares. C is cooperative. You've got to be able to cooperate with people on the other side of the aisle. That does not mean you compromise your principles. It means that you work and you compromise on maybe the task. A is we need to be accountable. The problem we have in the government right now is people are not held accountable, which then goes back to our families. Personal responsibility. Although I've heard here tonight that maybe that's an unchristian-like thing to do. If you remember what Jesus did, he provided opportunity for people to be able to fish. He didn't say, here's the fish, come and eat, sit down. He said, I'll feed your need right now, but then I expect you to be personally responsible and go take care of your families. So that's the A part of it. The R is respectful, responsible, and a good example. We need to become statesmen, ladies and gentlemen, that represent this district and our state in a respectful way where people are proud of what you've done. We're interviewing for a job. We've forgotten that. The elected official represents you, the people. We are hired to do a job and represent you, which means we didn't go down there in an ethical manner, be respectful and responsible, and understand what we're to do. And I believe I'm the best example to be able to do that. I don't have any felonies. I don't have any bankruptcies. I don't have any dirt if someone tries to create it. I'm in a position right now, whether we like it or not, to be able to go down and represent the people. I understand hardship has hit some families. I understand, just like any situation, there are isolated instances where things have happened and people have not been able to find work. But we also need to understand, with an unemployment rate of 10%, is what the government told me at worst case, that still means 90% of the people out there are working. Competition does breed the best solution. That means 9 out of 10 people were working. Be one of those 9 out of 10 people, because there's plenty of people that want to sit down and just take a handout. With that, again, thank you, Ricky.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out. I realize that our forum's not the typical one, and I have the highest of respect for both of you for coming in and answering the questions, and certainly wish you the best on Election Day, and look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.